The alarm screamed through the bridge of the UES Valiant as Captain Jake Morrison rushed to his command chair. His coffee spilled across the metal floor, forgotten in the urgency of the moment. Lieutenant Amy Brooks turned from her station, her face pale with worry. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal from Kepler Station," she said, her voice shaking. It's bad, sir." Jake grabbed the communication device from her hands. Static filled the air, mixed with screams and explosions. Through the chaos, he could hear a woman's voice crying for help. Children were crying in the background. Then the signal went dead. "How long ago did this come in?" Jake asked. 15 minutes, sir. We were the closest ship." Amy looked at her screens again. "Captain, the signal just stopped." Commander Rick Stone stepped forward, his military uniform pressed and clean despite the early hour. "Sir, Kepler Station has 50,000 people. Families, children, miners. They're not soldiers." Jake nodded grimly. "Set course for Kepler. System. Maximum speed." The Valiant was a good ship, but it took 6 hours to reach the Kepler system. 6 hours of worry and fear. Jake spent most of the time pacing the bridge, thinking about the families on that station. He had visited Kepler Station twice before. It was a peaceful place where humans mined rare metals and lived quiet lives far from Earth. When they arrived, Jake's heart sank. Where Kepler Station should have been, there was nothing but twisted metal and debris floating in space. The massive mining platform that had housed 50,000 people was gone. Only wreckage remained, glowing with radiation that made their sensors scream warnings. "My God," whispered Amy, staring at her screen. "It's all gone." Rick Stone ran his hands through his hair. What could do this? The station had shields, defensive systems. Jake stared at the destruction. Pieces of the station drifted past their ship like metal snow. He could see parts of homes, shops, and schools mixed in with the industrial wreckage. These had been people's lives, destroyed in moments. "Amy, scan for survivors," he ordered, though he already knew what she would find. "I'm trying, sir, but the radiation is making it hard to scan properly." She worked at her console for several minutes. "Captain, I'm not finding any life signs, but I'm picking up some data fragments from the station's computers. Can you recover them?" "I think so. It might take some time." Jake nodded. "Do it. We need to know what happened here." While Amy worked on recovering the data, Jake walked through the ship. He looked out the windows at the floating debris. Somewhere in that wreckage were the remains of 50,000 innocent people, farmers, miners, teachers, children, people who had never hurt anyone, who just wanted to live their lives in peace. 3 hours later, Amy called him back to the bridge. Her eyes were red, and he could tell she had been crying. "I got the recordings, Captain," she said quietly. "You need to hear this." The bridge fell silent as Amy played the recovered data. The voice of Station Commander Helen Davis filled the air, calm and professional even as explosions echoed behind her words. "This is Kepler Station to any ships in the area. We are under attack by Zephyrian Imperial forces. They gave us no warning, no demands. They just started firing." Her voice cracked slightly. "They're targeting the civilian areas, the schools, the hospitals. They're not trying to capture us, they're trying to kill us all." More explosions echoed through the recording. In the background, Jake could hear people screaming, children crying, and the sound of the station tearing apart. "They're saying this is a demonstration," Helen's voice continued. "A demonstration to show Earth what happens when we don't give them what they want. But we were negotiating. We were trying to work with them." The recording was interrupted by a massive explosion. When Helen spoke again, her voice was weaker. "To anyone who finds this, tell Earth what happened here. Tell them we died for nothing. Tell them we just wanted to live in peace." The recording ended. The bridge was completely silent. Rick Stone was the first to speak. "Zephyrians," he said, his voice full of hate. "Those monsters." Jake knew about the Zephyrian Empire. They were one of the most powerful alien groups in the galaxy. They controlled dozens of star systems and had technology that was much more advanced than human ships. They were also known for being cruel and caring only about power. "Amy, send," A message to Earth Fleet Command, Jake ordered. Tell them what we found, all of it. Yes, sir. Amy paused, then looked at him with angry tears in her eyes. Captain, they killed children. Little kids who never did anything wrong. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. I know. We're going to make sure Earth knows exactly what happened here. Over the next few days, the story of Kepler station spread across human space. The recordings that Amy had recovered were played on every news channel. People on Earth and the colonies heard Helen Davis's final words and saw the images of the destroyed station. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Humans everywhere were furious. They demanded justice for the innocent people who had died. But Jake knew that getting justice would not be easy. The Zephyrian Empire was too strong for humanity to fight directly. They had bigger ships, better weapons, and more experience in war. Most importantly, they were part of the Galactic Council, which meant other alien species would protect them from any human response. When Jake's ship finally returned to Earth, he was called to meet with Admiral Lisa Grant, the head of Earth Fleet Command. She was a tough woman who had served in the military for 30 years. Captain Morrison, she said, looking at the reports on her desk. What you found at Kepler Station, it changes everything. Admiral, those people died for nothing. The Zephyrians murdered them just to scare us. I know. Lisa Grant stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ships in Earth's orbital yards. The Galactic Council is calling it a regrettable incident. They say the Zephyrians had the right to defend their territory. Defend their territory? Jake's voice rose. Kepler Station was a mining colony. They had families there. The galaxy doesn't care about human families, Captain. To them, we're just another young species that needs to learn its place. Jake felt his anger growing. So that's it? 50,000 people die and nobody cares? Admiral Grant turned back to him, and Jake saw something dangerous in her eyes. I didn't say nobody cares, Captain. I said the galaxy doesn't care. But we're not the galaxy. We're human. She walked back to her desk and picked up a folder. I'm calling a meeting of the Earth Assembly. Every representative from every human world. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you murder our children. Jake left the meeting with a feeling that something big was about to happen. The look in Admiral Grant's eyes had been the look of someone ready to go to war, even against impossible odds. That night, he called Amy and Rick. They met at a small restaurant near the spaceport, where they sat quietly and thought about what they had seen at Kepler Station. The Zephyrians think they can just kill us and nothing will happen, Rick said, staring into his drink. Amy nodded. 50,000 people? Gone. And the galaxy just shrugs. Jake looked at his two friends and officers. Maybe the galaxy doesn't care, but we do. And maybe that's going to be enough. The Earth Assembly building had never been so full. Representatives from every human colony, every space station, and every ship in the fleet had come to hear what their leaders would say about Kepler Station. The great hall buzzed with angry voices as people demanded action. President Carl Matthews stood at the podium, his face serious and tired. He had been in meetings for 3 days straight, trying to find a way to respond to the massacre. Behind him, a large screen showed pictures of Kepler Station before and after the attack. The contrast was heartbreaking. My fellow humans, President Matthews began. We gather today to remember 50,000 innocent people who died simply because they were human. The Zephyrian Empire destroyed Kepler Station not for any military reason, but to send us a message. They wanted to show us that human lives mean nothing to them. The hall erupted in angry shouts. People stood up, waving their fists and demanding revenge. Matthews waited for them to quiet down before continuing. The Galactic Council has refused to take action. They say this was a territorial dispute and that humans should have known better than to mine in that system. They ignore the fact that we had permission, that we were negotiating fairly, that we followed all their laws. Dr. Helen Porter sat in the front row, listening carefully. She was Earth's top expert on alien species and had spent years studying how other worlds thought and acted. She knew that humans were seen as weak by most of the galaxy, young, emotional, and easy to push around. The other species think we will cry for a few months and then forget, she had told Matthews the night before. They expect us to accept this and move on like good little humans. Now, as she watched the president speak, she wondered if maybe the other species had made a mistake. The anger in this room was unlike anything she had ever seen. This was not the kind of anger that faded away. President Matthews finished his speech and stepped aside. Admiral Lisa Grant walked to the podium, her military uniform crisp and perfect. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that Admiral Grant was the person who would decide how humanity responded to this attack. "I want to tell you about Mary Chen," Admiral Grant began. She was 8 years old. She lived on Kepler Station with her parents and her little brother. She loved to draw pictures of spaceships and dreamed of being a pilot someday. The Zephyrians killed her while she slept in her bed. The Admiral's voice was steady, but Jake Morrison could see the anger in her eyes from where he sat in the military section. "I want to tell you about Robert Kim, who was 93 years old. He had moved to Kepler Station to be close to his grandchildren. He spent his days in the station's gardens, growing flowers for the children to pick. The Zephyrians killed him while he was watering his roses." Admiral Grant continued, telling story after story of the people who had died. She had memorized hundreds of names, hundreds of lives that had been cut short. With each story, the anger in the room grew stronger. "The galaxy thinks we will forget these names," she said finally. "They think we will move on and pretend this never happened. They think human life is cheap and human memory is short." She paused, looking around the room at all the faces staring back at her. "They are wrong." Admiral Grant raised her right hand, high above her head. "By the earth that gave us birth, by the stars that light our way, by the blood of our children who died innocent and alone, I swear that humanity will not rest until every being responsible for the Kepler Station massacre faces justice." The room exploded. Every person stood up, raising their hands and repeating the oath. Their voices joined together in a sound that seemed to shake the building itself. Jake found himself standing with the others, his hand in the air, his voice adding to the chorus of 50,000 humans swearing vengeance. "We swear it," they shouted together. "We swear by Earth. We swear by our dead." Captain Nina Rodriguez sat in the intelligence section, watching the ceremony with professional interest. She had spent years working in the shadows, gathering information about alien species and their plans. She knew better than anyone how the galaxy would react to this display. "They'll think we're being emotional," she thought. "They'll expect us to calm down in a few weeks." But as she looked around the room, she realized that this was not ordinary human emotion. This was something colder, more focused. This was the anger of a people who had decided that enough was enough. After the ceremony, Jake Morrison found himself in Admiral Grant's office along with several other officers. Colonel Ben Parker was there, his Marine uniform bearing the scars of a dozen battles. Captain Rodriguez sat quietly in the corner, her sharp eyes taking in everything. "Admiral." "Colonel," Parker said, "with respect, how are we supposed to fight the Zephyrian Empire? They have 10 times more ships than we do, and their technology is much more advanced." Admiral Grant smiled grimly. "Colonel, you're thinking like a traditional military officer. This isn't going to be a traditional war." She activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire controlled a large section of space marked in red. Human territory was much smaller, marked in blue. "The Zephyrians think we'll try to attack their military directly," she explained. "They're prepared for that kind of war. They have big fleets and strong defenses. But they're not prepared for what we're actually going to do." Jake leaned forward. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to hunt them. Every single being who was involved in the Kepler Station massacre, every officer who gave orders, every soldier who fired weapons, every politician who approved the attack. We're going to find them all, one by one, and bring them to justice." "Captain," Rodriguez nodded slowly, "the galaxy expects us to act like a government, but we're going to act like police. We're not interested in conquering territory or winning battles. We just want the criminals who killed our people." "Exactly," Admiral Grant said. "And that's why we're going to win. The Zephyrians can't fight an enemy they don't understand." Over the next few weeks, human space transformed. Ships that had been used for mining and trade were brought to military yards and fitted with weapons. Civilian pilots volunteered to fly military missions. Factories that had made tools and computers switched to making guns and ammunition. Dr. Porter watched the preparations with fascination and worry. She had never seen humans act with such unity and purpose. Every colony was sending ships and people to join the fleet. Even the most peaceful human settlements were contributing to the war effort. "This is unprecedented," she wrote in her reports to the government. "Humans are acting not as separate colonies or nations, but as a single species, with a single goal." The psychological impact of the Kepler station massacre has created something new in human culture. The alien species noticed the human preparations, but they weren't worried. The Altarian Council sent a message offering to mediate the dispute. The Vorthan Collective suggested that humans should accept monetary compensation for their losses. The Galactic Council passed a resolution calling for calm and reasonable responses to the tragedy. Admiral Grant read these messages with cold amusement. "They still don't understand," she told her staff. "They think this is about money or territory or political advantage. They don't realize that we're not fighting for gain. We're fighting for justice." Captain Morrison was put in command of the 1st Human Strike Force. His ship, the Valiant, was joined by 200 other vessels, including converted civilian ships and brand new military craft built specifically for this mission. As the fleet prepared to depart, Amy Brooks sent a message to every human colony and ship in space. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in all human languages, and intercepted by alien intelligence services across the galaxy. "This is Lieutenant Amy Brooks of the UES Valiant, speaking for the human fleet. To the Zephyrian Empire and all who support them. You murdered 50,000 innocent people. You killed our children, our elders, our families. You did this to frighten us, to make us submit to your will." Her voice was calm and steady, but there was steel underneath the words. "You have made a mistake. Humans do not frighten easily, and we do not forget. We are coming for everyone who had a part in the Kepler Station massacre. We will find you, we will capture you, and you will face justice for what you have done." The message ended with the names of the 50,000 dead, read slowly and clearly. It took 6 hours to read them all. By the time it was finished, every intelligence agency in the galaxy had recorded it. The hunt was about to begin. 3 months after the oath, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valiant watching 200 human ships move into battle formation. Around him, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. This was not their first fight since leaving Earth, but it would be their biggest. "Target confirmed," reported Amy Brooks from her station. "The Zephyrian battle station at Centauri Junction. Intelligence says War Commander Vorthak is stationed there." Rick Stone checked his tactical display. "Sir, we're outnumbered 3-1. They have heavier ships and better shields." Jake nodded calmly. "That would matter if we were trying to win a traditional battle. But we're not here to destroy their fleet, we're here to capture one alien." The human fleet spread out as they approached the Zephyrian position. To the enemy, it looked like the humans were preparing for a standard attack. The Zephyrians formed their own battle line, confident in their superior firepower. War Commander Vorthak watched the humans approach from his command ship. He was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and multiple eyes. Like most Zephyrians, he believed that humans were weak and cowardly. The destruction of Kepler Station was supposed to have frightened them into surrender. "These humans are fools," he told his officers. "They cannot hope to defeat a Zephyrian battle group with their primitive ships." The battle began exactly as Vorthak expected. The human ships opened fire, but their weapons barely scratched Zephyrian shields. The Zephyrian ships returned fire, destroying several human vessels in the first few minutes. But then something strange happened. Instead of retreating or trying to fight the main Zephyrian fleet, the human ships began acting in ways that made no sense. Some ships ignored the enemy completely and flew straight at the command vessel. Others concentrated all their fire on the engines and communication systems of Zephyrian ships, trying to disable rather than destroy them. "What are they doing?" Vorthak demanded. "Why aren't they fighting properly?" His question was answered. when the first human boarding ships reached his command vessel. The humans had converted several civilian ships into boarding craft, filled with Marines in heavy armor. These ships crashed directly into Zephyrian hulls, cutting through the metal with powerful tools. Colonel Ben Parker led the first boarding team onto Vorthak's ship. His Marines moved through the corridors with deadly precision, not stopping to fight ordinary Zephyrian soldiers. They were looking for specific targets, and they knew exactly where to find them. "War Commander Vorthak," Parker said as he entered the command center, his weapon pointed at the alien's head. "You are under arrest for the murder of 50,000 humans at Kepler Station." Vorthak stared at the human in shock. "This is impossible. You cannot simply board my ship and arrest me. There are rules of war." Parker's voice was cold behind his helmet. "You should have thought about rules when you murdered children." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out on other Zephyrian ships. Human Marines boarded vessel after vessel, ignoring treasure or military supplies. They only wanted specific aliens, those who had been present at the Kepler Station attack. The Zephyrians were completely unprepared for this type of warfare. Their tactics were designed for traditional space battles, not for an enemy that treated warships like police targets. Within 6 hours, the humans had captured 12 high-ranking Zephyrian officers who had participated in the massacre. Captain Nina Rodriguez coordinated the intelligence operation from her ship, the Ghost Runner. Her network of human spies had spent months identifying every Zephyrian who had been involved in the attack. She had names, ranks, and locations for hundreds of targets. "Captain Morrison," she reported over the communication system, "we've confirmed the capture of War Commander Vorthak and 11 of his senior staff. They're all on the list." Jake nodded with satisfaction. "Casualties?" 43 human ships destroyed, but most crews evacuated safely. Total human deaths 206. Zephyrian deaths approximately 3,000. The numbers told the story of a very unusual battle. In a traditional fight, both sides would have tried to kill as many enemies as possible, but the humans had focused on specific targets, accepting heavy losses to capture particular individuals. Amy Brooks began broadcasting on all Zephyrian frequencies. Her message was simple and direct. "This is the human fleet. We have captured War Commander Vorthak and his staff. They will be taken to face trial for war crimes. Any Zephyrian forces that attempt to rescue them will be treated as accomplices to murder." The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and confused. Other alien species had never seen anything like this. The humans had won a battle not by destroying an enemy fleet but by kidnapping specific individuals. It was warfare, but it was also police work. The Altarian Council sent an urgent message to Admiral Grant on Earth. "The human attack on Centauri Junction violates all accepted norms of warfare. Military personnel cannot be held responsible for following orders from their government." Admiral Grant's reply was broadcast across the galaxy. The humans who died at Kepler Station were not military personnel. They were civilians. Men, women, and children who had never hurt anyone. If the galaxy believes that following orders excuses the murder of innocents, then the galaxy is wrong. Over the following weeks, human fleets struck Zephyrian positions across dozens of star systems. Each attack followed the same pattern. The humans would fight just hard enough to board enemy ships, capture specific individuals, and then withdraw. They showed no interest in holding territory or destroying entire fleets. The Zephyrian Empire began to panic. Their military leaders started to realize that the humans had a complete list of everyone who had been involved in the Kepler Station attack. War Prime Kethros, the overall commander who had ordered the massacre, found himself surrounded by guards at all times. "How do they know so much about our operations?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. "How do they know exactly which ships were at Kepler Station and exactly who was on board?" The answer came from Captain Rodriguez's spy network. For months, human intelligence agents had been working throughout Zephyrian space. They had bribed officials, hacked computer systems, and even recruited Zephyrian citizens who were disgusted by their government's actions. Dr. Helen Porter, now serving as Earth's representative to other species, explained the human position in a meeting with alien diplomats. "You keep asking us to stop treating this as a criminal matter," she said to the assembled aliens. "You want us to see the Kepler station massacre as a political or military issue. But 50,000 innocent people are dead. In human culture, that makes this a crime. And crimes must be punished." The Vorthan Collective offered to mediate, promising that the Zephyrians would pay money to human families who had lost relatives. Porter's response shocked them. "You cannot pay money to bring back the dead. You cannot negotiate with murder. The people responsible for Kepler Station must face justice." As the human campaign continued, other alien species began to realize something terrifying. The humans were not interested in conquest, territory, or even traditional victory. They wanted specific individuals, and they were willing to tear apart the entire galactic order to get them. The Chronari Empire, which had been planning its own expansion into human space, quietly canceled all military operations. The Stellar Federation began reviewing its own treatment of human colonies, making sure they had never done anything that might anger this new, frightening version of humanity. Captain Morrison found himself promoted to admiral as more human fleets joined the hunt. Ships from every human colony contributed to the growing armada. Civilian volunteers worked alongside military personnel, united by their desire to see justice done for the dead of Kepler Station. "Admiral," Amy Brooks reported during one of their briefings, "we've now captured 67 individuals who were directly involved in the massacre, but intelligence indicates there are still over 400 more." Jake looked at the star charts showing their next targets. The hunt was far from over, but humanity had proven something important to the galaxy. They had shown that humans would not forgive the murder of innocents, no matter how long it took to track down the killers. "Then we keep hunting," he said, simply. "We made an oath. We swore justice. And we're going to keep that promise." Across the galaxy, alien governments began to understand that something fundamental had changed. The young, emotional humans were gone. In their place was something much more dangerous, a species that treated the murder of their civilians as an unforgivable crime, and who possessed both the determination and the growing military power to enforce their own version of justice. The galaxy had awakened something in humanity that it was beginning to regret. 6 months into what the galaxy now called the Human Hunt, Admiral Lisa Grant arrived at the front lines with the entire Earth Defense Fleet. Her flagship, the UES Retribution, was the largest and most powerful ship humanity had ever built. Behind it came 300 more vessels, including the pride of Earth's military. Admiral Jake Morrison met her at the rally point near the Zephyrian border. His fleet had grown to over 800 ships as colonies throughout human space sent everything they had to support the hunt for justice. "Admiral Grant," Jake said as they met in person aboard the Retribution, "I wasn't expecting Earth's main fleet to join us." Lisa Grant looked older than when Jake had last seen her. The weight of command during humanity's first major war was showing on her face, but her eyes still burned with the same cold fire that had started this whole campaign. "The President wanted to keep the defense fleet at Earth in case of alien retaliation," she said. "I told him that Earth doesn't matter if we lose our soul. These murderers killed our children, Jake. All of them, every single one." She activated a holographic display showing their current position. The human fleet now surrounded 3 entire Zephyrian star systems, cutting off all travel and communication. No ship could enter or leave without human permission. "A blockade?" Jake asked. "The most complete blockade in galactic history," Grant confirmed. "War Prime Kethros is somewhere in these systems. Intelligence indicates he's trying to reach the Galactic Council worlds where he thinks he'll be safe. We're going to make sure he never leaves." Captain Nina Rodriguez joined them, her intelligence report showing the current location of their most wanted targets. "We've identified Kethros's location. He's on the planet Zephyr Prime, hiding in the government center. The problem is he's surrounded by millions of civilian Zephyrians." Grant studied the data. "Recommendations?" "We wait," Rodriguez said. "He has to come out eventually, or we can try to infiltrate the planet and extract him." "No." Grant's voice was firm. "We don't risk human lives to avoid alien casualties. But we also don't hurt innocents. We do this the right way. Amy Brooks, now promoted to commander and serving as the fleet's communication officer, had been monitoring alien news broadcasts. "Admiral, the other species are getting scared. The Altarian Council is calling for an emergency session. The Vorthan Collective is offering to surrender Kethros if we'll stop the blockade." Grant smiled coldly. "Tell them that justice cannot be negotiated." The human blockade was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Traditional blockades were meant to starve planets into surrender or prevent military supplies from reaching an enemy. But the humans weren't interested in harming civilians or winning territory. They simply wanted to make sure that specific war criminals couldn't escape. Dr. Helen Porter had established a temporary embassy on a neutral station near the blockade zone. Every day, representatives from different alien species came to beg her to convince humanity to stop their campaign. "Dr. Porter," said Ambassador Tythek of the Altarian Council, "this blockade is hurting innocent Zephyrian civilians. Surely humans don't want to harm people who had nothing to do with Kepler Station." Helen looked at the alien diplomat with tired eyes. She had been having this same conversation for weeks with different species. "Ambassador, the blockade allows all humanitarian supplies to pass through: food, medicine, civilian transportation. The only things we're stopping are military vessels and any ship that might be carrying war criminals. But the economic damage—" 50,000 humans died at Kepler Station," Helen interrupted. "Men, women, and children who never threatened anyone. They were murdered to make a political point. Do you understand what that means to humans? The why?" Ambassador's translator device struggled with human emotional concepts. "The Altarian Council understands your anger, but surely—" "No," Helen said firmly. "You don't understand our anger. If you did, you would have arrested these war criminals yourselves instead of making excuses for them." Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy. The Stellar Federation offered to pay massive compensation to human families if the blockade was lifted. The Chronari Empire, terrified that humans might turn their attention to other species, began reviewing every interaction they had ever had with human colonies. Colonel Ben Parker had been promoted to general and placed in charge of all human ground operations. His Marines had become legendary throughout the galaxy, not for their brutality, but for their precision. They could board an enemy ship, capture specific individuals, and leave without harming anyone else on board. "General Parker," reported one of his officers, "we've intercepted communications indicating that several Zephyrian military leaders are ready to surrender War Prime Kethros rather than face continued human pressure." Parker nodded. "The smart ones are realizing that we're not going away. We're not getting tired. We're not going to accept any compromise that leaves murderers free." The tipping point came when the Zephyrian Empire began to fracture from within. Regional governors, terrified of human retribution, started surrendering war criminals to avoid having their territories blockaded. The central government found itself fighting not just humans but its own people. Governor Zelthak of the Outer Rim territories sent a message directly to Admiral Grant. "I am prepared to surrender 17 officers who participated in the Kepler Station attack. In exchange, I ask that human forces avoid my territory." Grant's reply was broadcast across the galaxy. "Justice is not a trade agreement. Surrender the war criminals because it is the right thing to do. Do it because they murdered innocent people. Do it because crimes must be punished. We are not interested in bargaining with you." Captain Rodriguez's intelligence network had grown beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human agents now operated in every major alien capital, tracking down information about war criminals and monitoring government reactions to the ongoing hunt. "Admiral," she reported to Grant during one of their briefings, "we're seeing panic reactions from species that weren't even involved in Kepler Station. The hegemony has increased security around all their military leaders. The Trade Federation is reviewing their records to make sure they never harmed human civilians." Grant studied the intelligence reports with satisfaction. "Good. Let them be afraid. Let them understand that humanity takes the murder of innocents seriously." The psychological impact of the human campaign was spreading far beyond the Zephyrian Empire. For the first time in galactic history, A young species was enforcing its own moral standards on older, more powerful civilizations. The implications terrified government leaders across hundreds of worlds. Amy Brooks had become the voice that the galaxy associated with human justice. Her daily broadcasts were translated into dozens of alien languages and monitored by intelligence agencies everywhere. "This is Commander Amy Brooks speaking for humanity," she said in her latest broadcast. "Some of you have asked us when this will end. The answer is simple. This ends when every being responsible for the Kepler station massacre faces trial. This ends when justice is served. This ends when the galaxy understands that the murder of human civilians will not be tolerated, negotiated, or forgiven." The broadcast continued with an updated list of captured war criminals and those still being sought. The list had grown to over 600 names, from War Prime Kethros down to individual soldiers who had fired on civilian areas. President Carl Matthews received urgent messages from dozens of alien governments, all begging him to call off the hunt. His response was always the same: "I cannot call off justice. I cannot negotiate with murder. The fleet will continue its mission until every war criminal is captured." The most shocking moment came when War Prime Kethros himself attempted to negotiate directly with humanity. In a message sent through diplomatic channels, he offered to resign from the military and pay personal compensation to human families. Admiral Grant's response was played on every news channel in the galaxy. "War Prime Kethros, you ordered the murder of 50,000 innocent people. You killed children in their beds. You destroyed families and ended thousands of lives for political gain. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise. There is only justice. You will face trial for your crimes." As the blockade entered its second month, the Zephyrian government made a desperate decision. They announced that they were expelling War Prime Kethros and his staff from the military and banishing them from Zephyrian space. "Let them be someone else's problem," declared the new Zephyrian leadership. "We wash our hands of their crimes." The human response was swift and decisive. Admiral Grant announced that any ship carrying war criminals would be stopped regardless of which government claimed authority over it. Any world that harbored them would be blockaded. Any species that helped them escape would be considered accomplices to murder. For the first time in galactic history, the murder of civilians had consequences that couldn't be avoided through politics, diplomacy, or superior firepower. The galaxy was learning to fear human justice, and that fear was changing everything. 1 year after the Kepler station massacre, the human fleet returned to where it all began. The Kepler system was empty except for the floating debris that marked the graves of 50,000 innocent people. But now, humanity had built something new in that space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the massive space station that humans had constructed exactly where Kepler station once orbited. This new station was different from its predecessor. It was bigger, stronger, and built not for mining but for justice. "The Memorial Court of Kepler is ready, Admiral," reported Commander Amy Brooks. "Representatives from every species in the galaxy are in attendance. The prisoners are secured and ready for trial." Jake nodded, looking out at the incredible sight before him. Hundreds of ships filled the space around the new station. Human vessels formed a protective ring, but inside that ring were ships from dozens of alien species. For the first time in galactic history, every major civilization had sent representatives to witness a human trial. They had come not out of respect but out of fear. The year-long hunt had captured every single being responsible for the Kepler station massacre. War Prime Kethros and 847 of his subordinates now sat in cells aboard the Memorial Court, waiting to face judgment for their crimes. Dr. Helen Porter had been chosen as the chief prosecutor. She had spent months preparing her case, reviewing evidence, and interviewing the few survivors who had escaped Kepler station before its destruction. Her task was to prove to the galaxy that what happened here was murder, not warfare. "Dr. Porter," said Admiral Lisa Grant, as they prepared for the opening session, "the galaxy is watching. Every word you speak will be translated and broadcast to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds." Helen nodded grimly. "Good. Let them hear what their silence cost. Let them understand what happens when innocent people are murdered and nobody cares. The trial began with a moment of silence for the dead. On screens throughout the courtroom, the faces of all 50,000 victims appeared. Children and grandparents, minors and teachers, shopkeepers and artists, people who had committed no crime except being human in the wrong place at the wrong time. War Prime Kethro sat in the defendant's chair, his gray skin pale with fear. For a year he had hidden behind lawyers and diplomats, claiming that he was only following orders, that the attack was a legitimate military action, that humans had provoked the response by refusing to abandon their mining claims. Dr. Porter approached him with a tablet in her hands. War Prime Kethros, I want you to look at this picture. The image showed an 8-year-old human girl named Sarah Kim, smiling as she held a drawing she had made of a spaceship. She had lived in the residential section of Kepler Station with her parents and baby brother. This child was asleep in her bed when you ordered your ships to fire on the civilian areas of Kepler Station, Porter said. Can you explain to this court what military threat she posed to the Zephyrian Empire? Kethros's lawyer, an expensive advocate from the Altarian Council, stood up. Objection. This is an emotional appeal, not a legal argument. Judge Samuel Torres, a human who had spent decades studying galactic law, looked at the alien lawyer with cold eyes. Overruled. The prosecutor is establishing the civilian nature of the targets. Continue, Dr. Porter. Porter showed more pictures. Robert Chen, age 91, who had spent his retirement teaching children in the station's school. Maria Santos, a doctor who ran the station's free medical clinic. David Kim, an engineer who had volunteered to maintain the station's life support systems. Every one of these people was a civilian, Porter said, her voice growing stronger with each image. They were not soldiers. They carried no weapons. They threatened no one. And you ordered them killed to make a political point. The evidence was overwhelming. Human intelligence had recovered communications from Zephyrian military networks, recorded conversations between Kethros and his officers, even video footage from the attack itself. The prosecution showed, minute by minute, how the massacre had been planned and carried out. The defendant will claim he was following orders, Porter told the court. But the evidence shows that War Prime Kethros personally selected civilian targets. He specifically ordered his ships to fire on the residential areas, the schools and the hospitals. This was not warfare. This was murder. Kethros's defense was everything the humans had expected. He claimed the attack was justified because humans had refused to leave the system when ordered. He argued that civilian casualties were inevitable in military operations. He insisted that he was following the laws and customs of the Zephyrian Empire. Dr. Porter's response was devastating. The defendant claims he was following Zephyrian law. Let me read from the Zephyrian Military Code of Conduct. She held up a document that Captain Rodriguez's intelligence network had obtained. Section 47 states that attacks on civilian populations for the purpose of terror are forbidden under all circumstances. Section 52 states that military commanders who deliberately target non-combatants shall face court-martial and punishment. The court fell silent. Kethros had not only violated human concepts of justice but his own empire's laws as well. You see, Porter continued, this was not a case of following orders or cultural differences. This was a war crime under anyone's definition. The defendant chose to murder 50,000 innocent people, and he chose to violate his own military's code of conduct to do it. The trial lasted for 3 weeks. Every victim was remembered by name. Every crime was documented in detail. The FUR Galaxy watched as humanity presented evidence with scientific precision and legal thoroughness. Colonel Ben Parker, now General Parker, testified about the human boarding operations that had captured the war criminals. We could have killed them all during the battles, he told the court. It would have been easier, but we wanted them alive. We wanted them to face trial. We wanted the galaxy to see that crimes against humanity have consequences. Captain Rodriguez testified about her intelligence operations, explaining how humans had identified every person involved in the massacre. We didn't want revenge, she said. We wanted justice. and justice requires that the guilty be identified, captured, and held accountable for their actions. When the evidence was complete, Dr. Porter made her final argument to the court. War Prime. Kethros and his officers stand accused of the premeditated murder of 50,000 innocent human beings. The evidence is clear. The guilt is undeniable. The only question is whether this court will uphold the principle that civilian lives have value, regardless of which species they belong to. She paused, looking around the courtroom at the alien representatives who had come to witness this unprecedented trial. The galaxy ignored this crime for a year. Governments that claimed to stand for justice and law did nothing when 50,000 innocents were murdered. They offered excuses, political solutions, monetary compensation, everything except justice. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of humanity's anger and determination. Today, that changes. Today, the galaxy learns that human life has value. Today, the galaxy learns that the murder of innocents will not be tolerated, excused, or forgotten. Today, justice is served. The verdicts were unanimous. War Prime Kethros and all 847 of his subordinates were found guilty of murder, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The sentences ranged from life imprisonment to execution, depending on each individual's level of responsibility. As the sentences were carried out, Admiral Grant made a final broadcast to the galaxy. The Kepler Station massacre has been answered. Justice has been served. But let this trial be a warning to every government, every military, every individual who might consider harming human civilians. She paused, her words carrying the weight of humanity's newfound power and determination. We are not conquerors. We are not interested in your territory or your resources. We simply want to live in peace. But if you harm our innocent, if you murder our children, if you think human life is worthless, then you will face the same fate as those who destroyed Kepler Station. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about humanity. They had discovered that humans would not accept the murder of innocents, no matter how politically convenient it might be. They had learned that human justice, once awakened, was patient, thorough, and absolutely relentless. In the years that followed, the Memorial Court of Kepler became a permanent institution. The Galactic Council passed the Kepler Protocols, establishing new protections for civilian populations across all species, not out of moral conviction, but out of fear of what humanity might do if such massacres happened again. Commander Amy Brooks was named the first administrator of New Kepler Station, built in the exact location where the original colony had stood. Her first official act was to read the names of all 50,000 victims into the station's permanent record. They will not be forgotten, she said as the ceremony concluded. Their deaths will not be meaningless, and their justice will stand as a warning to anyone who thinks that innocent life is cheap. The galaxy had awakened something in humanity that it would never be able to put back to sleep. And in the depths of space, wherever humans lived and worked and raised their families, they knew that their species would protect them with a determination that had made the entire galaxy shake in fear.